Honourable Peter Dunn.
Mr Speaker, may I begin by congratulating you again and your Deputy and Assistant Speakers on your selection to perform these important presiding roles in this 50th Parliament. I also want to acknowledge and congratulate the mover and the seconder of this debate for their confidence and for their two very fine speeches setting out their aspirations, their hopes and their plans this afternoon. And I encourage them and all new members to revisit their maiden speeches from time to time as a sort of a checklist about how well they are doing in living up to the objectives and the ideals that they set out on this very important occasion. I want also to pay thanks to the people of Ohio for their continued support over 10 elections now, and to say how humbling it is to be the recipient of that support so consistently. And I look forward to working with you to implement the policies that were set out in my 10-point plan for Ohio upon which we campaigned at election time. Mr Speaker, the last election and the formation of the government that flowed from it took place against unprecedented circumstances in our country's history. We've had just about every form of natural disaster that could befall a country in the last 12 months. From the flooding in the Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty with which 2011 began, to the levelling of our second city through an ongoing series of massive earthquakes, and now most recently to horrific floods on the eve of Christmas in the Nelson area. And if that is not bad enough, we also stand against a backdrop of the worst international economic crisis since the Great Depression. We are, I believe, seeing the start of the unravelling of the political and economic settlement that's underpinned Europe since the end of World War II. And the consequences of that are becoming more manifest each day as more revelations occur about the depth of indebtedness in those economies, the risks to currency stability, and the flow-on effects for distant, small economies like ours. So here we are, on the one hand, having to cope with an unprecedented set of disruption and disaster within our own realm, and on the other, having to face an unprecedented set of international economic disruption. The outlook in many senses could not be more bleak or more challenging. And I agree with the concept that just about every speaker in this debate has advanced so far, that things have to change. The old ways are no longer going to be good enough. But the question, Mr Speaker, is what that change is going to be about and on what is it going to be based. One of the things that United Future negotiated in its confidence and supply agreement was work towards the development of a family status report. This is based on work that's been done by the new coalition government in the United Kingdom to set up some key indicators to measure the impact of government policies against those indicators, because that then determines expenditure levels. Let me give an example of a situation we have in New Zealand. Over the last 5 or 6 years, there has been a substantial increase under the present government and its predecessor in spending on early childhood education. That is good and noble and right and proper. But when we look at the consequences of that, we can draw three conclusions. The very wealthy haven't benefited to any extent. Good, you might say. Those in the middle haven't benefited to any extent either. And those at the bottom socioeconomically have suffered a marginal decline. So here we have had a significant increase in spending to no apparent positive benefit. And the point that arises from that is that we need to be constantly evaluating our spending programs to ensure that they achieve the objectives that we so nobly set for them at the outset. And then we need to be prepared to make change when clearly policy is not working. And I think that in the context of the debate we had right through this election campaign about families, about children, about poverty, about support for families, about support for those who were vulnerable, the sort of thing I'm talking about here is a critical tool in the analysis in terms of the direction of future policy. because our traditional response has simply been to say, things don't appear to be working, we'll pour more money into it. And we don't live any longer in an environment where we are so unconstrained. So that will be a very important step to getting a clear measure of the impact of expenditure on policy, the impact of policy on families, and the need for change in the future. It will not just be about boosting the circumstances of the families of this country, but also ensuring that our national patterns of spending are sustainable and are able to be achieved within what will be a very tense international situation. Another area which is perhaps at the other end of the spectrum, which comes into focus here, which our agreement also covers, is the issue of superannuation. There was a debate during the election campaign, I think it was the wrong debate, about whether the age of entitlement should shift from 65 to 67. I'm in favour of keeping the age at 65. But, Mr Speaker, I acknowledge that there are significant numbers of New Zealanders who are currently struggling to survive till they're 65. Demographically, we know that Maori, Pacifica, manual workers have very short periods of retirement, and many don't actually live to qualify for New Zealand superannuation. We also know that there's an increasing tendency for people to stay in the workforce longer. So we developed the notion, which will now be the subject of a government discussion paper, of a flexible approach to superannuation, enabling people to choose to take a discounted or reduced rate from the age of 60, the full rate at 65, or an enhanced rate if they choose to defer until they are 70 or above. And the point about that, Mr Speaker, is that it recognises social change that's occurring. It's not going to alter people's lifespans, but it is going to improve, potentially, the quality of life that they enjoy. But also, sir, it makes the choice one for them, not the state telling them that you will retire at this age or that. They make the choice. And in years to come, as more and more New Zealanders take up KiwiSaver, and it becomes effectively a compulsory national savings scheme, then there will be a much better balance in terms of how people can plan their futures, knowing that they will be able to secure a good KiwiSaver payout at the age of 65, and they may well be in a better position then to judge how long they want to stay in the workforce once they turn 60. Mr Speaker, this is a debate this country needs to have, but it's important that it be one that is structured properly and actually addresses the real issues and doesn't simply become a trade-off of this age or that, as I fear the debate that was being initiated during the election campaign might turn out to be. Mr Speaker, there are some other matters I want to talk about briefly in the remaining time available to me, and they concern some of the issues relating to a pretty critical part of New Zealand's lifestyle, our appreciation of our great outdoor environment. And United Future has always taken a strong stance on preserving public access to the great outdoors and also ensuring that those people who like to enjoy the great outdoors can do so in a way that is fair and reasonable to others. And that's why we want to curb the practice of a form of heli hunting whereby animals are herded and hazed into very difficult and tough situations, at which point the hunters can simply pick them off. And Mr Speaker, I know that you have a particular interest in this issue. It's one that I've enjoyed the benefit of your discussion on many occasions. But it's an important issue about ensuring that our quality of life, not to mention the quality of life of the animals concerned, but our vision for New Zealand is preserved and we can start to enjoy some of the challenges that are so difficult for us. Mr Speaker, before I conclude, can I simply say at the end of what has been this most difficult year for New Zealand, I hope New Zealanders are able to spend some time with family and friends over the coming holiday period to reflect on what is good in our country, to look positively to the future. My very best wishes to everyone in the House and in the wider parliamentary complex and the country as a whole for a happy, peaceful and relaxing Christmas break.
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, I move that the debate be now adjourned.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, following agreement with the Business Committee, I seek leave for the House to sit beyond 6 p.m. this evening to complete the adjournment debate should the time be needed.
Is there any objection to that course being followed? It appears not. Leave is granted. Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn